If you know so much, then play. 10 pianists failed, but the beggar played perfectly. Jennifer Wilson watched through the fogged window of the Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts as yet another pianist failed before the sheet music that had become a legend in Boston. Her trembling fingers mentally followed every wrong note, every unnecessary pause, every misguided interpretation that made her heart ache. 10 pianists had already attempted to perform the piece that Richard Thompson, the most influential businessman in the state, had set as a challenge. The promise was tempting: $200,000 for whoever could play the composition he had guarded for decades perfectly. But what no one knew was that Jennifer knew every comma of that sheet music, every pause, every nuance that made the piece impossible to decipher for anyone except the one who had created it. "Curse it!" Richard shouted when the 10th pianist gave up mid-performance. "You call yourselves professionals, and you can't even get past the second movement." The grand hall of the theater was packed with the city's cultural elite. Journalists, musicians, businessmen, and onlookers crowded in to witness the event, which had already lasted 3 hours. Some whispered that the sheet music was impossible to play. Others claimed Richard was just putting on a show to promote his business. "Maybe the piece really is impossible, Mr. Thompson," said Michael Parker, conductor of the local symphony orchestra. "I've analyzed the sheet music, and some passages defy musical logic." "Impossible is the word the incompetent use when they don't want to admit their limitations," Richard snapped, running a hand through his graying hair. At 65, the businessman had built an empire in the cultural events industry, but that sheet music was his greatest treasure and his greatest frustration. Jennifer adjusted her worn-out coat, shielding herself from the theater's icy air conditioning. Her 68 years of life had taught her that some secrets were too heavy to carry alone. She had spent the last 15 years sleeping in parks, begging for change, and being ignored by a society that didn't recognize the talent beneath poverty's appearance. "If no one else wants to try, I declare the challenge over," Richard announced, placing the sheet music back into a leather folder. That was when a hoarse but firm voice echoed through the hall: "If you know so much, then play." Everyone turned toward the main entrance. A woman with unkempt gray hair, dressed in tattered clothes and carrying a plastic bag, walked slowly toward the stage. Her steps were steady, contrasting with her fragile appearance. "How did this person get in here?" someone in the audience asked. "Security!" Richard shouted. "Remove this woman immediately." But Jennifer had already climbed onto the stage and approached the grand piano. Her fingers lightly touched the keys, testing the tuning. It was a Baldwin, the same model she had played at Carnegie Hall in New York 40 years ago, when she was still known as the Black Pearl of New England. "Wait," said Barbara Johnson, a retired journalist covering the event for a cultural blog. Something about those gestures felt familiar. "Let her play." Richard stormed down from the stage toward the piano, furious. "You don't have permission to be here. Leave immediately, or I'll call the police." Jennifer looked at him for the first time in 15 years. Those brown eyes that had once shone with love for him now held only deep coldness. "You offered $200,000 to whoever could play your piece, didn't you?" she said, taking the sheet music from the folder he held. "You never said it was only for pianists with diplomas hanging on their walls." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers tremendously. Now, continuing. The audience murmured with curiosity. Barbara discreetly raised her phone and began filming. There was something about that scene her journalistic instinct told her was important. Richard tried to grab the sheet music back, but Jennifer had already placed it on the piano stand. Her hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from restrained emotion. 40 years later, she would finally have the chance to perform publicly the music born from her soul. "This sheet music is copyrighted," Richard said, playing his last card. "You can't play it without the composer's permission." "Oh, really?" Jennifer smiled for the first time, a smile carrying decades of pain and irony. "And who would the composer be, Richard?" The businessman paled. The way she said his name, the familiarity in her tone, made fragments of memory connect in his mind. But it was impossible. Jennifer Wilson had disappeared 15 years ago. People said she'd had a nervous breakdown and vanished. Some rumors claimed she'd taken her own life. "I don't know you," Richard lied, though his voice shook. "No?" Jennifer positioned her fingers over the keys. "Then you won't mind if I play." The first notes flowed from the piano like crystal clear water. It was impossible to describe the precision of her touch, how each key responded perfectly to the necessary pressure. The music wasn't being played, it was being revived. The audience, which moments earlier had murmured impatiently, fell into absolute silence. Even the approaching security guard stopped mid-step, hypnotized by the melody rising from the instrument. It was a complex piece, alternating between melancholic passages and bursts of passion. Jennifer's hands danced across the keys with a familiarity that only comes from years of intimacy with every note. She didn't glance at the sheet music. Her eyes were closed, as if the music sprang directly from her memory. Michael Parker, the conductor, approached the stage with disbelief. "She's playing variations that aren't in the score," he whispered to Barbara. "How does she know these passages?" Richard stood frozen, watching the performance transport him back to 1985. Back then, Jennifer had been a 23-year-old prodigy, the daughter of a Cambridge fisherman who discovered her talent by chance. She played piano at the local church when a music teacher heard her and decided to help. The memory was vivid. Jennifer sitting at the piano in her Beacon Hill apartment, composing that very piece while he watched, smitten. She had written the music inspired by their relationship, each movement representing a phase of their love story. "How do you play like that?" someone from the audience asked. Jennifer didn't stop playing but answered without opening her eyes. "Because I wrote every note of this music." A murmur of shock rippled through the hall. Richard felt his legs weaken. All these years he'd registered the composition under his name, claiming he'd bought it from an anonymous composer. The piece had been performed at major concerts, always credited to him. "That's a lie," Richard shouted. "This composition is mine. I have all the documents to prove it." Jennifer finally opened her eyes but kept playing. "Documents can be forged, Richard, but music doesn't lie." Then she began playing a variation that definitely wasn't in the original score, a passage she'd composed in her mind during her years on the streets, a natural evolution of the original piece that reflected all the pain and growth she'd endured. Barbara continued filming, now realizing she was documenting something historic. Her journalistic instincts were on high alert. She vaguely remembered reading about a promising pianist who had mysteriously disappeared in the 90s, but the name escaped her. "Stop this!" Richard stepped onto the stage and tried to close the piano lid, but Jennifer kept playing despite the limited space. "You're disrupting a private event." "Private?" Jennifer smiled ironically. "You invited the press, issued a public challenge, promised $200,000. Now you're calling it private because you didn't like the outcome?" Elizabeth Thompson, Richard's daughter, watched the scene from the back of the hall. At 30, she was a lawyer working in her father's business. Something about the woman's posture, the way she addressed Richard, caught her attention. The music reached its climax, an extremely technical passage requiring both hands to play independent melodies in different rhythms. It was the part that had defeated all the professional pianists. Jennifer executed it with an ease that seemed supernatural. "My God," whispered one of the pianists who had tried to play earlier. "She's playing as if the music is part of her." "Because it is," said a familiar voice. Everyone turned to see William Harris, an 80-year-old musician who had once taught at the New England Conservatory of Music. He slowly approached the stage, leaning on a cane. "Professor Harris," said Michael, "do you know this woman?" "I do," the elderly man replied, climbing the stage with difficulty. "Jennifer Wilson, the most talented pianist to ever come through the conservatory. I taught her when she was 15. Richard tried to interrupt. "Professor, with all due respect, you're confusing people. This woman is a beggar, not a pianist." "Oh, Richard," William stared at him sternly. "Then explain how a beggar can play Renewal in D minor with absolute perfection." "Renewal in D minor?" Barbara stopped filming for a second. "That's the name of the piece?" "Yes," William confirmed. "Jennifer composed it in 1985 while still studying with me. It was about a relationship she was in at the time." The silence in the hall was deafening. Jennifer had stopped playing and was staring directly at Richard. Her eyes said everything words couldn't express. Betrayal, abandonment, years of suffering. "Professor," Elizabeth said, stepping closer, "are you certain she composed this piece?" "Absolutely." William placed a hand on Jennifer's shoulder. "I was there when she wrote it. I remember it like it was yesterday. She came to class glowing, saying she'd fallen in love, and the music was flowing like never before." Richard made one last attempt. "These are just the confused memories of an old man. They prove nothing." "No." Jennifer rose from the piano and walked to the plastic bag she'd left on the floor. "Then maybe this will." She pulled out an old notebook, its pages yellowed with age. A handwritten score with personal notes. She flipped through until she found what she was looking for. "This is the original version of Renewal in D minor," she said, showing the pages to the audience. "Handwritten in 1985. You can see the date here." Barbara moved closer to film the notebook. The pages were clearly aged, the ink faded but still legible. At the top of the first page it read, "To Richard, the love of my life, Jennifer Wilson, October 1985. That could have been forged," Richard stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Forged?" William laughed. "Richard, you're humiliating yourself. I recognize Jennifer's handwriting. I've corrected thousands of her exercises." Elizabeth took the notebook from Jennifer's hands and examined it carefully. As a lawyer, she had experience analyzing documents. The paper was clearly old, the ink had faded naturally, and there were several corrections and notes indicating the creative process. "Dad," she said softly, "this document seems genuine." "Elizabeth, don't be naive." Richard tried to take the notebook, but she pulled away. "No, Dad, I need to understand what's happening here." Jennifer returned to the piano and began playing another passage, this time a simpler, more melancholic melody. "This piece is called Final Farewell," she said. "I composed it the day I discovered you had registered my music as your own." The melody carried a deep sadness, filled with a pain that touched everyone in the room. Several people began to cry, including Barbara, who kept filming even with tears in her eyes. "Stop this," said Richard, but his voice was broken. "Please, stop." "Why?" Jennifer continued playing. "Does the truth bother you? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Elizabeth sat in a chair near the stage, still holding the notebook. "Dad, I need you to explain what happened." "There's nothing to explain." Richard avoided looking at Jennifer. "This woman is clearly disturbed. She probably copied my music and is now trying to pass herself off as the composer." "Your music?" Jennifer stopped playing and turned to him. "Richard, you can't even read sheet music properly. How could you have composed something like this?" I hired composers to write for me." "That's a lie," said William. "Richard, you're digging yourself into a deeper hole. I know your musical background. You've always been a manager, never a composer." Barbara had stopped filming and was searching on her phone. "I found something," she announced. "There's a 1990 article in the Boston Globe archives about the disappearance of a promising pianist. Jennifer Wilson, 28, vanished after reporting the theft of her compositions." She read the article aloud. "Young pianist Jennifer Wilson disappeared last Tuesday after claiming that manager Richard Thompson had stolen her compositions and registered them as his own. Thompson denied the allegations and said the pianist was experiencing psychological issues. The case is under police investigation." "And what happened to the investigation?" asked Elizabeth. Barbara kept searching. "Apparently it was closed due to lack of evidence. Jennifer was never seen again, and the case was forgotten." "Because I was threatened," Jennifer said calmly. "Richard used all his connections to destroy me. No theater would hire me. No conservatory would accept me as a teacher. I was 28, and my career was ruined overnight." "That's not true," Richard protested weakly. "No?" Jennifer opened the notebook again, and showed a specific page. "This is a letter you wrote to me in 1987, 2 years after our relationship ended. You admit you registered my music because it was too good to be forgotten." Elizabeth read the letter silently and her face paled. "Dad, this really is your handwriting. I recognize it." "Elizabeth, please don't believe this woman. She's clearly unstable." "Unstable?" Jennifer laughed bitterly. 15 years on the streets because you destroyed my life and I'm the unstable one?" William stepped closer to Richard. "Richard, I was there when Jennifer disappeared. I saw what you did to her. How could you?" "Professor, you don't understand." Richard tried to justify himself. "Jennifer was unstable. She had emotional problems. I was trying to protect her." "Protect her?" Jennifer stood up from the piano again. "You used me, stole my work, and then discarded me when you didn't need me anymore." The truth was beginning to take shape in Elizabeth's mind. She had always admired her father's musical talent, his compositions that had been successful in the late 80s and early 90s. But now, looking at this broken woman, who played with the precision of an angel, she was starting to understand that it had all been a lie. "Jennifer," Elizabeth said softly, "what happened after you disappeared?" Jennifer sat on the edge of the stage, suddenly looking exhausted. "I tried to start over in other cities. I went to Chicago, then Philadelphia, New York City. But Richard had spread rumors about me in the music world. They said I was unstable, that I stole songs from other composers, that I couldn't be trusted." "That's a terrible lie," whispered Barbara. "I managed to find sporadic work, playing in bars and restaurants, but I never got to perform professionally again. Little by little, I lost hope." "And how did you end up on the streets?" William asked, tears in his eyes. "Depression," Jennifer said simply. "I lost my last job in New York City in 2008. I couldn't pay rent anymore, had no family to help me. Slowly, I spiraled downward until I was sleeping on the street." "Why did you come back to Boston?" Elizabeth asked. "Because this is my home, and because I knew that one day the truth would have to come out." Richard, who had stayed silent throughout Jennifer's explanation, finally exploded. "Enough! Enough of this act. Even if you really are Jennifer Wilson, it changes nothing. The songs have been registered in my name for over 30 years. You have no way to prove they're yours." "No?" Jennifer smiled sadly. "Richard, you were always tone-deaf when it came to music. Want me to prove these compositions are mine?" She returned to the piano and began playing Renewal in D minor again, but this time she stopped midway and started improvising. The notes flowing from the piano weren't in any sheet music. It was as if she were completing the piece, showing how it would naturally evolve. "That's impossible," murmured one of the pianists who had tried to play earlier. "She's creating variations in real time that fit perfectly into the original structure." "Only the original composer could know the music that deeply," Michael agreed. "And there's more," Jennifer said, stopping. "All my compositions have a musical signature, a specific progression I always use." She played a sequence of chords that appeared in the piece she had just performed. "This sequence is in all my works. It's like a musical fingerprint." William nodded. "It's true. I always pointed out that feature in her compositions. It was something unique to her." "That could be a coincidence," Richard said desperately. "It could," Jennifer agreed. "But what are the odds that a homeless woman would know this specific compositional technique? Play a piece you claim to have written with absolute perfection, have a notebook of handwritten sheet music from 1985, and even improvise variations that fit seamlessly into the musical structure." The silence in the hall was absolute. Even Richard couldn't find any more arguments. "Dad," Elizabeth said quietly, "you need to tell the truth." "There's no truth to tell." "Yes, there is," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see an elegant woman in her 50s entering the hall. It was Catherine Miller, owner of one of the city's most important art galleries. "Ms. Miller," Barbara asked, "do you know this story?" "I do," Catherine said, walking toward the stage. "Jennifer, my dear, what a joy to see you alive." The two women embraced emotionally. It was the first warm hug Jennifer had received in years. "Catherine was my best friend at the time," Jennifer explained to the audience. "The only person who believed in me when everything happened. And I have proof of what Richard did. said Catherine, pulling an envelope from her bag. Recordings of conversations he had with me in 1987, admitting he had registered Jennifer's songs as his own. Richard turned completely pale. You couldn't have kept this for so long. Oh, I could, Catherine replied, because I knew the truth would come out one day, and I kept everything, waiting for the day Jennifer would return to reclaim what was hers. Elizabeth took the envelope from Catherine's hands. May I listen? Of course. Catherine had a small, old tape recorder. She inserted a cassette and pressed play. Richard's voice, younger but unmistakable, echoed through the hall. Catherine, you have to understand, Jennifer's songs are incredible, but she doesn't have the emotional strength to handle success. I'm doing her a favor by registering the compositions under my name. This way, she's protected from the troubles of the music industry. But Richard, that's not fair to her. They're her creations. Fair. Catherine, I invested time and money in her career. I deserve some return. And besides, who would believe a girl from Cambridge could compose such sophisticated music? The recording continued for a few more minutes, with Richard explaining how he had falsified documents and bribed people to secure the rights to the songs. When it ended, the hall was deathly silent. Elizabeth stared at her father with shock and disappointment. Dad, how could you? Richard was defeated. There was no more denying it. I was young. I made a mistake. A mistake? Jennifer stepped toward him. You destroyed my life out of greed. That wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Jennifer, you have to understand. Richard tried to approach her, but she stepped back. I loved you. I did it because I thought you couldn't handle the pressure of success. You loved me? Jennifer laughed bitterly. Love doesn't destroy. Love doesn't steal. Love doesn't abandon. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Barbara had resumed filming and was now also recording the audio of the conversation. She knew she was documenting one of the biggest scandals in the regional music scene. Jennifer, William said gently, what do you want to do now? Jennifer looked around the hall at all the people watching her with a mix of admiration and pity. Then she turned to Richard, the man who had shattered her dreams, and to Elizabeth, who gazed at her with tears in her eyes. I want justice, she finally said. I want my name back. I want the world to know who really composed these songs. Are you going to sue us? Elizabeth asked. Sue? Jennifer shook her head. Elizabeth, I spent 15 years on the streets. Do you think I care about money now? Then what do you want? Jennifer returned to the piano and placed her hands on the keys once more. I want to play. I want people to hear my music and know it came from the heart of a woman who dared to dream. She began playing a new piece, something no one had ever heard before. It was a deeply emotional composition, telling the story of her journey through the streets, her nights on cold benches, her daily struggle to survive. This song is called Rebirth, she said as she played. I composed it in my head during my years of suffering. It's about not giving up, even when all seems lost. The music grew in intensity, revealing all the inner strength that had kept Jennifer alive during her darkest moments. It was impossible not to be moved listening to that piece. When she finished, the audience erupted in applause. Many were crying, including Richard, who finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of what he had done. Jennifer, he said, his voice choked. Forgive me. Please, forgive me. She looked at him for a long moment. Richard, forgiveness won't give me back the 15 years I lost. It won't erase the nights I spent cold and hungry. It won't heal the humiliation I endured. I know, but please. But, Jennifer continued, resentment won't bring any of that back either. And I'm tired of carrying this weight. Elizabeth approached the piano. Jennifer, I want to help you. I want to make right what my father did. How? I'll transfer all the rights to the music back to you, and I'll arrange a public statement acknowledging your authorship. Richard tried to protest, but Elizabeth silenced him with a look. And there's more, she continued. I'll fund the recording of an album with your compositions, with your performance. The world needs to hear your talent." Jennifer felt tears welling in her eyes. It was the first time in decades someone had offered her a real chance at a fresh start. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Elizabeth replied, "and because you deserve it." Catherine stepped closer to them. "Jennifer, I have a proposal too. How about we hold a reopening concert at the New England Conservatory of Music? You'd be the headliner." "A concert?" Jennifer could barely believe what she was hearing. "A concert," William confirmed, "and I'd like to be your official host. I want to tell your story so no one ever forgets it." Barbara put away her phone and joined the group. "And I'll write your biography. This story needs to be preserved." Jennifer looked around at all these people who, just minutes ago, had been complete strangers and were now offering her a new lease on life. She felt overwhelmed by human kindness. "I don't know if I can," she said honestly. "It's been so many years. Maybe I'm not the same pianist I once was." "Jennifer," William said gently, "we just heard you play like an angel. You haven't lost anything. On the contrary, your music now has a depth only suffering can bring." "He's right," Michael agreed. "The way you play today is even more moving than when you were young." Jennifer turned back to Richard, who stood silently in a corner of the stage. "And you? What do you have to say?" Richard took a deep breath before answering. "I destroyed your life out of pure greed and cowardice. No words can express my regret. If you'll allow me, I'd like to help too." "Help how?" "I have connections across the country. I can ensure your music is played in the finest concert halls. I can make sure your name becomes known nationwide." Jennifer considered his offer for a moment. "And why would you do that?" "Because I need to try to fix the wrong I've done, and because you deserve all the recognition I stole from you." The pianist rose from the piano bench and walked to the edge of the stage, gazing at the audience watching her in respectful silence. "Do you know what was hardest about those 15 years on the streets?" she asked. "It wasn't the hunger or the cold or the humiliation. It was the silence, not being able to do the one thing I truly knew how to do, create music." She returned to the piano and played a few random notes. "Music never abandoned me. Even in the worst moments it was here," she said, placing a hand over her heart. "I composed dozens of pieces in my mind over the years, entire symphonies that exist only in my memory." "Do you still remember them all?" asked Michael. "From every note," confirmed Jennifer. "And now maybe I'll have the chance to take them out of my head and put them on paper." Elizabeth approached again. "Jennifer, I want to do more than just return the royalties. I want to create a foundation in your name to help young musicians in need." "A foundation?" "Yes. So no talent is lost for lack of opportunity. So no young musician is exploited like you were." The idea deeply touched Jennifer's heart. That would be wonderful." "And I'd like to be the first sponsor," said Catherine. "My gallery has profited greatly from cultural events over the years. It's time to give back." Barbara joined the group. "And I'll make sure the Foundation's story is widely shared. We'll find other sponsors." William smiled. "I'd love to be the Foundation's educational director. I have 50 years of experience in music education." Jennifer felt overwhelmed by the generosity she was receiving. It was as if the universe was compensating for all the years of suffering at once. I don't know what to say," she murmured. "You don't have to say anything now," said Elizabeth. "You've been through so much, you need time to process all this." "Actually," said Jennifer, returning to the piano, "I know exactly what to say." She began playing a new melody, unlike anything she'd played before. It was a song full of hope, gratitude, and infinite possibilities. "This song is called Thank You," she said as she played. "It's for you, for all of you who gave me back hope when I thought I'd lost it forever." The performance was magical. Every note seemed to carry all the emotion Jennifer felt in that moment. It was pure music born straight from the heart. When she finished, there was a moment of absolute silence before the applause erupted. But this time, it was different applause. It wasn't just for the music, but for the courage of a woman who had survived the impossible. "Jennifer," said a voice from the audience. It was an elderly man who had watched everything in silence until then. "My name is Daniel Robertson. I'm the director of Landmark Records." He approached the stage. "I'd like to offer you a contract to record an album of your compositions." "Really?" Jennifer could hardly believe it. "Absolutely. What we witnessed here today is something unique. Your story, your talent, your compositions, all of it deserves to be preserved and shared with the world." Richard stepped forward hesitantly. "Daniel, I'd like to transfer all my contacts and connections to help Jennifer's career. It's the least I can do." Daniel nodded. "I accept your collaboration, Richard. Despite what happened, you know the music industry well." "Thank you," said Richard, clearly moved by the chance to make amends. Jennifer watched all the activity around her with a mix of joy and disbelief. She had woken up that morning thinking it would be just another day in the square, scavenging for food and trying to stay warm. Now, she was being offered an entirely new life. "Can I ask a question?" she said to the group. "Why are you all doing this for me?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Elizabeth answered. "Because your talent shouldn't stay hidden," said Daniel. "Because you deserve it," added Catherine. "Because music needs you," William finished. Jennifer felt an emotion she hadn't experienced in decades. True hope. "Then I accept. I accept it all." The audience burst into applause again. Barbara kept filming, knowing she was documenting a historic moment. "But I have one condition," said Jennifer when the applause died down. "What is it?" asked Elizabeth. "I want part of the album and concert profits to go toward programs assisting the homeless. I spent 15 years on the streets and know how invisible these people are to society." "Of course," Daniel agreed immediately. "We can create a specific social program for that." "And I'd like to organize benefit concerts in public squares and spaces," Jennifer continued, "to bring classical music to people who've never had access to it." "Excellent idea," said Catherine. "We can use my network to arrange these events." William approached Jennifer and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Jennifer, you've become an extraordinary woman. Suffering didn't break you, it made you stronger." "Professor, there were times I wanted to give up on everything," she confessed. "Nights so cold I thought I wouldn't see dawn. Days when hunger was so fierce I considered doing anything for a meal." "But you endured," he said. "I endured because music never abandoned me. Even without a piano, I kept composing in my head. That's what kept me alive." Michael joined the conversation. "Jennifer, I'd like to propose something. How about we debut your return to the stage right here at Lincoln Center? We could organize a special concert." "Here?" Jennifer looked around the theater where it had all begun. "That would be perfect. And I'd like to conduct the orchestra," Michael offered. "It would be an honor to work with you." "The honor would be mine," Jennifer replied. Elizabeth stepped forward again. "Jennifer, one last offer. Would you like to stay with us while you get back on your feet? We have a large home and you'd have your own space, with a piano and everything." Jennifer hesitated. The offer was tempting, but she'd learned to value her independence. "Elizabeth, I deeply appreciate it, but I'd prefer to find my own place. After so many years, I need to rebuild my life step by step, at my own pace." "I completely understand," Elizabeth said. "But if you change your mind, our door is always open." "Thank you, truly." Barbara packed up her filming equipment and approached. "Jennifer, when would you like to start working on the biography?" "Biography?" Jennifer smiled. "Barbara, my life has barely begun again. Maybe we should wait and see where all this change leads." "You're right," Barbara agreed. "But I'd love to document your journey, your return to the stage." "I'd like that," Jennifer said. Daniel approached with a contract in hand. "Jennifer, I know it's a lot to process in one day, but I'd like you to look this over when you have time. No rush." Jennifer took the document, still absorbing everything. "Daniel, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Why do you believe in me? You don't even know me." Daniel smiled. "Jennifer, I've worked in music for 40 years. I've seen many talents, many prodigies. But what I witnessed today was different. It wasn't just technique or skill. It was pure soul expressing itself through music." He paused. "And anyone who survives 15 years on the streets yet still creates beauty has an inner strength rare in this world." Tears welled in Jennifer's eyes, tears of gratitude, relief, hope. "May I play one more piece?" she asked. "Of course," Michael said. "This stage is yours." Jennifer returned to the piano one last time that afternoon. "This piece is called New Dawn," she announced. "It's for everyone who believes it's never too late to start again." The music that flowed from the piano was unlike any other, brighter, fuller of life. She spoke of second chances, of dreams rising from the ashes, of hearts that refused to give up. As she played, Jennifer felt as though she was saying goodbye to the woman she had been for the past 15 years, the invisible, broken, forgotten woman, and embracing the woman she was becoming once more. When the music ended, she rose from the piano and bowed to the audience. She was no longer the beggar who had entered the theatre hours earlier. She was Jennifer Wilson, pianist and composer, back in the place that had always been hers. "Thank you," she said to them all. "Thank you for giving me back my identity." The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. It was recognition not just of her talent, but of her courage and resilience. As the applause continued, Jennifer looked at Richard, standing at the back of the stage, clapping with tears in his eyes. She walked toward him. "Richard," she said softly, so only he could hear. "Yes, I forgive you." He looked at her in surprise. "Jennifer." "Not for you," she clarified. "For me. Because holding on to anger for so long was killing me inside, and now I have a new life ahead. I don't want to start it carrying the weight of the past." Richard broke down in tears. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you so much." "But that doesn't mean I've forgotten what happened," Jennifer added. "It just means I choose to move forward. I understand, and I promise I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did." "Don't do it for me, Richard. Do it for yourself. Do it for, and for others who might be going through what I went through." Elizabeth approached the two of them. "Dad, are you okay?" "I am, sweetheart," Richard replied, wiping his tears. "For the first time in a long time, I'm okay." Jennifer took one last look around the theatre before leaving. The place where her career had been shattered was the same place where she was being reborn. There was a poetry in that which moved her deeply. "You all know where to find me," she said to the group. "I'll still be in the square for a few days, sorting through my things, processing everything." "Jennifer," said William, "are you sure you don't want help finding a place to stay tonight?" "I'm sure, Professor. I need to make this transition at my own pace. 15 years on the streets don't disappear overnight." "We understand," said Catherine. "But please, let us help with some basics. Clothes, food." "I'll accept that," Jennifer smiled. "I'm not too proud for that." Barbara hugged her warmly. "Jennifer, thank you for sharing your story with us. You're an inspiration. Thank you for believing in me." Daniel handed her his card. "Jennifer, call me when you're ready to talk about the album. No rush." "I will." One by one, they all said their goodbyes, until only Jennifer, Elizabeth, and Richard remained in the theatre. "Jennifer," Elizabeth said, "I know you and my father have a complicated history, but I'd like to get to know you better, as a person, not just as the woman he hurt." "I'd like that too," Jennifer replied. "You seem like an admirable woman." "I learned to be that way despite my father's example," Elizabeth said, glancing at Richard. "But maybe he can learn to be better too." Richard nodded. "I'll try, sweetheart. I swear I'll try." Jennifer picked up her plastic bag and headed for the theatre exit. At the door, she turned back one last time. "You know what's funny?" she said. "All these years, I dreamed of this moment, the day the truth would come out and I'd have my revenge." "And now?" Elizabeth asked. "Now I realize revenge wasn't what I really wanted. What I wanted was just to be seen, to be heard, to be remembered." "And now you will be," Richard said. "Yes," Jennifer smiled. "Now I will be." She left the theatre and walked slowly toward the square where she had spent so many nights. But this time, her step was different. It was no longer the heavy walk of someone who had lost hope. It was the stride of someone heading toward a new future. That night, for the first time in 15 years, Jennifer slept with a smile on her face. She was still in the square, still without a home, still had much to rebuild. But now she had something she had lost long ago. She had her identity back, and for the first time in decades, she began to dream of music again. End of story. Dear listener, now tell me what you thought of this story of overcoming and second chances. Do you believe Jennifer made the right choices in forgiving Richard? Share your honest opinion in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think. Thank you so much for joining us this far, and don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories like this one.